Cocaine doesn't kick down the door. It slips in quietly, sits beside you, and tells you it's helping. There are no sirens, no flashing lights, no moment where the world clearly falls apart. Consider this, instead, a bathroom stall, a phone vibrating once a line drawn faster than a thought, and a promise that tonight will be easier, smoother, more manageable. This is how the most profitable illegal drug on Earth operates, not through chaos, but through convenience. In cities across Europe, cocaine now moves faster than food delivery, faster than a rideshare, sometimes faster than hesitation itself, and that speed has changed everything. This is not a story about junkies or crime movie villains. This is a story about people who show up to work, people who pay rent, people who tell themselves they're in control. Cocaine no longer lives on the margins. It lives in clubs, offices, hospitals, kitchens, and bedrooms, embedded into the machinery of modern life like a software update no one remembers installing. And while politicians argue, while headlines fade, while users reassure themselves that this is temporary, something much larger is happening underneath. Global supply chains are flooding markets with cheaper, purer product. Criminal networks are enforcing silence with bullets. Brains are being rewired to confuse stimulation with survival. The crisis isn't coming, it's already here, hiding in plain sight, disguised as energy, confidence, productivity, relief. And the most dangerous part is this: almost no one who's inside it believes they are. Cocaine doesn't announce itself through chaos. It enters through routine. It shows up in ordinary lives at ordinary moments, disguising itself as a small adjustment rather than a turning point. A doorman clocks in for another 12-hour shift, already exhausted before the night begins. A woman steps into a club bathroom not to break rules, but to shake off the weight of a week that never seemed to end. A freelancer stares at a glowing screen past midnight, convincing himself that one more push is the difference between falling behind and staying afloat. A gamer chases focus, not escape. A young man scans a crowded room, heart racing, certain he cannot survive the noise without chemical help. These people don't know each other. They don't share backgrounds, ambitions, or identities. What they share is a belief that cocaine is not the problem, but the solution. It's not rebellion, not recklessness. It's management. Management of stress, of fatigue, of social fear, of expectations that never stop rising. Cocaine has shed its old image of decadence and danger and replaced it with something far more seductive: usefulness. It promises clarity in confusion, confidence in doubt, energy when the body says no. And it delivers just long enough to earn trust. That trust is where the real shift happens. The drug stops being an event and becomes a tool. A line before work feels no different than a strong coffee. A bump in the bathroom feels like maintenance, not excess. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the boundary between choice and necessity begins to blur. Nights start revolving around access. Days are measured by recovery. And still, from the outside, everything looks normal. Jobs are kept. Conversations continue. Smiles hold. This is how cocaine spreads, not by destroying lives all at once, but by integrating itself so smoothly into them that people no longer recognize where they end and the drug begins. Cocaine works because it doesn't fight the brain, it cooperates with it, exploits it, and then quietly rewrites its priorities. The human brain is built around reward, a system designed to keep us alive by reinforcing what feels meaningful. Dopamine isn't pleasure itself. It's the signal that tells the brain this moment matters, that this action should be remembered and repeated. Cocaine hijacks that signal with ruthless efficiency. Instead of waiting for effort, connection, or achievement, it forces dopamine to flood the system all at once, trapping the brain in a state of artificial importance. Colors feel sharper. Thoughts feel faster. Confidence rises without being earned. For a brief window, the world feels aligned, controllable, almost generous. But the brain is not passive. It adapts. It recalibrates. What once felt extraordinary becomes baseline, then insufficient. The same dose stops delivering the same clarity. The brain, now accustomed to exaggerated signals, begins to dull everything else. Normal rewards, conversation progress, rest lose their weight. This is where the illusion tightens. Users often believe they are chasing pleasure, but what they're really chasing is normalcy, a return to a state that cocaine itself has taken away. The crash isn't just physical exhaustion, it's emotional flattening anxiety, a sudden sense that something essential has gone missing. and the brain remembers the shortcut. It remembers how quickly the discomfort disappeared last time. This isn't a failure of discipline or character. It's biology responding exactly as it was designed to optimizing for a chemical lie. Cocaine doesn't convince the brain to want more. It convinces the brain that more is necessary. And once that association is formed, stopping isn't about resisting temptation. It's about teaching the brain slowly and painfully how to feel meaning again without being forced. Cocaine doesn't trap people the same way, but it always pulls them in the same direction. Researchers and clinicians see the patterns repeat not as stereotypes, but as pathways, different doors that all open onto the same narrowing corridor. Some users arrive through celebration. They tell themselves it's only for weekends, only for parties, only to feel the music longer and the night more intensely. The danger isn't the first line. It's the second, the third, the way time collapses and dosing becomes reactive, not deliberate. Mixed with alcohol, cocaine stops being a stimulant and becomes something far more lethal, a chemical partnership that strains the heart while masking its warning signs. Others use cocaine to smooth social friction. In loud rooms and high-pressure jobs, it turns awkwardness into confidence, silence into conversation. Over time, the line between personality and performance erodes until being on feels impossible without chemical assistance. A third group arrives seeking relief rather than excitement. For people with ADHD, depression, or chronic anxiety, cocaine can feel like clarity, like the noise finally turning down. That temporary calm is seductive, but it trains the brain to outsource regulation, making the underlying condition sharper and more dangerous when the drug fades. Then, there are those chasing output workers, entrepreneurs, caregivers, people whose lives demand endurance more than joy. Cocaine doesn't make them better at what they do. It simply keeps them awake long enough to keep going. Productivity rises as the body quietly accumulates damage, and the line between ambition and dependency disappears. These categories feel separate, but they converge quickly. What begins as choice becomes strategy, then routine, then requirement. The drug stops being about pleasure or relief and starts becoming about avoiding the crash, the silence, the sudden inability to cope without it. This is the turning point most users don't recognize. By the time cocaine feels necessary, the exit is already harder to see. There is no safe profile, no protected mindset, no version of use that remains untouched. There are only different speeds, different rationalizations, and the same gravity pulling everyone toward the same conclusion. Once cocaine becomes integrated into how life functions, it begins to decide how life feels. What looks like a personal habit is in reality the visible tip of an industrial system built for scale. Cocaine didn't become cheaper, stronger, and more available by accident. It evolved to fit a global economy obsessed with speed, efficiency, and margins. A single gram can cost just a few dollars to produce at the source and sell for tens or even hundreds on the street, a profit curve so steep it warps everything around it. That margin finances logistics networks that rival legitimate corporations' routes mapped across oceans, ports, and highways, hiding in plain sight among bananas, coffee, and everyday cargo that moves the world. Containers stack by the millions. Inspections catch a fraction. Purity rises anyway. This is not a failure of enforcement so much as a demonstration of supply overwhelming resistance. As production increases, competition intensifies and the product adapts, cut smarter, moved faster, delivered closer to the user than ever before. Accessibility isn't a side effect, it's the business model. And where the money flows cleanly, control must be enforced brutally. Violence isn't random here, it's managerial. Threats, intimidation, and targeted killings are used to protect routes, silence witnesses, and settle accounts. Cities absorb this pressure quietly until it surfaces in shootings that feel sudden but are anything but. The system thrives on fragmentation, farmers isolated at the source, dock workers pressured at ports, users disconnected from consequences, each piece shielded from the whole. This distance allows the myth to persist that cocaine is a personal choice, a private risk. In truth, every line participates in a supply chain that consumes lives at both ends through toxic labor conditions upstream and fear-driven governance downstream. The flood never stops because the incentives never change. As long as demand is normalized and profit remains extraordinary, the system will keep refining itself, shedding visibility while increasing reach. What begins as a powder in a bathroom is sustained by an architecture of money and force, so vast that by the time it becomes visible, it's already too embedded to remove without shaking the foundations it now quietly supports. Violence enters this story not as chaos, but as maintenance. When a product generates billions and moves invisibly through everyday systems, it requires enforcement that is precise, selective, and terrifyingly efficient. Journalists who trace supply routes don't die by accident. They are silenced. Lawyers representing witnesses aren't collateral damage. They are warnings. The killings are rarely loud or indiscriminate because noise attracts attention. Instead, the message is delivered cleanly, close and personal, designed to travel faster than headlines ever could. This is how a black market economy governs itself, through fear that doesn't need to be repeated often to remain effective. Entire neighborhoods learn the rules without being formally told. Port streets and social circles adjust quietly, understanding which questions not to ask and which lines not to cross. Teenagers are recruited because they are cheap, replaceable, and legally confusing. Explosions and shootings erupt suddenly in cities that appear stable, shocking the public for a moment, before fading back into the background hum of normal life. But these incidents aren't anomalies. They are pressure releases from a system under constant competition. Every seized shipment creates a vacuum. Every vacuum invites retaliation. Cocaine doesn't just move through cities, it reorganizes them, bending behavior through intimidation, long before violence becomes visible. What makes this stage especially dangerous is how far removed it feels from the user. In a bathroom stall, the powder looks clean, detached, consequence-free. The violence feels abstract, distant, like someone else's problem. But the connection is direct. The same efficiency that delivers cocaine quickly also delivers punishment just as fast when profit is threatened. This is the cost of keeping the flow uninterrupted. And by the time the public notices the blood on the street, the system has already absorbed the loss, recalculated the risk, and continued forward, unchanged. The collapse rarely arrives in a single dramatic moment. It settles in quietly the morning after, blending into the morning after that, until exhaustion becomes the default state. The music is gone, the crowd dispersed, and what remains is a body that feels overworked and under-rewarded. Sleep doesn't restore anything. Food tastes flat. Motivation flickers and dies. Long-term cocaine use doesn't erase joy all at once. It lowers the baseline, teaching the brain to expect stimulation before it allows satisfaction. Conversations feel thinner. Hobbies lose gravity. Even rest becomes restless, haunted by the sense that something is missing. Anxiety creeps in without a clear cause, followed by irritability and emotional numbness that users often mistake for stress or burnout. The most dangerous shift happens internally, when people stop asking whether the drug is hurting them and start asking how they'll function without it. Quitting isn't defined by physical pain so much as psychological silence, the sudden absence of the chemical signal that once made everything feel urgent and meaningful. The brain, trained to rely on an artificial shortcut, struggles to remember how to generate motivation on its own. This is where isolation deepens. Friends pull away. Shame fills the gaps. Many users continue not because they want to feel high, but because they're trying to avoid the hollow stretch where nothing feels rewarding at all. By the time the breakdown becomes visible from the outside, it has already been unfolding internally for a long time, unnoticed, rationalized, and quietly endured. Cocaine survives not because it delivers chaos, but because it sells control. More energy when you're tired. More confidence when you doubt yourself. More focus when the world feels overwhelming. At first, it appears to solve problems faster than anything else, and that illusion is powerful enough to silence concern. But control gained this way is borrowed, not owned. Slowly, almost invisibly, the drug begins to dictate the terms when motivation arrives, when calm is allowed, when joy is permitted. What feels like empowerment becomes dependency, disguised as discipline. Not everyone who uses cocaine will lose everything, but no one uses it without being changed. Over time, the brain's ability to feel satisfaction without chemical assistance weakens, and ordinary life starts to feel smaller, flatter, less worth engaging with. This is the legacy cocaine leaves behind, not shattered lives in every case, but diminished ones narrowed by constant compensation. Recovery is not about purity, moderation, or willpower alone. It requires rebuilding connection, relearning patience, and allowing discomfort without escaping it. The most dangerous lie cocaine tells is not that it will make you feel good, but that you can manage it forever. In reality, the longer it remains integrated into daily life, the more quietly it replaces the very systems that once made life feel meaningful. And by the time that loss becomes undeniable, the work of undoing it has already begun. Cocaine doesn't end lives with an explosion. It erodes them with precision, turning energy into dependency and control into illusion. This story isn't about morality or blame. It's about awareness in a system designed to normalize harm. When a substance rewires how we cope, connect, and perform, the cost is no longer personal. It's social. The warning is simple and urgent. What feels manageable today can quietly decide how tomorrow feels. If this investigation changed the way you see the issue, like this video. If you believe this conversation needs to reach others, share it. And if you want more deep investigations that cut past headlines and into real systems, subscribe and stay part of the conversation.